Ransomware is more of like a sabotage action, like kidnapping. Their whole goal in life is to get money from you. That's it. So with breaches, for instance, we'll watch where they'll kind of stay hidden in the network for years sometimes to steal your stuff, to do other things. Ransomware, they only want to be undetected long enough for your dwell time. We'll talk about that. So they want to be in there, bypass your AV until they detonate. And when they're about to be had, that's when they'll normally encrypt as well. More importantly, breaches are a mature industry. The value of your data is going way down because there's just so much out there from every single person getting hacked, publicized or not. What we're seeing is on the ransomware side actually is that the cost, like the ransom, is going up significantly, especially with attacks like Baltimore and places like that, because they realize that they're not charging enough. Because if they're charging Baltimore, for instance, what was it, 100K or whatever it was, and then the city spent like some untold millions, I think it was 18 million, to actually bring everything back up. Speaking hacker, right, what does that mean? The hacker should have charged $17 million, right? So what we're seeing is that the ransomware are going up exponentially along with the automation and the attacks. That's just what's happening right now. What I'm seeing is that there's going to be a lot of play in terms of costs for the business and in terms of like the ransom as that kind of stabilizes. Speaking to insurance firms and cyber insurance, they can already tell they're in for a rocky ride. Okay, so let's just talk about encryption for a second. Dig deep, do some self-introspection, and do some math. So the way that ransomware normally works is it follows standard encryption techniques. This is important, even though it's kind of nerdy. Right crowd, right? It follows standard encryption techniques for encrypting your files. A lot of people don't realize this. So what the normal pattern is that we have RSA here, so you have some kind of like SSL type encryption going on. What they're doing is they are protecting the key that is used for file encryption and decryption. So if you forget everything else here, just know that it's important that symmetric key, good for file, fast encryption and decryption. Asymmetric, great for not letting you find the key, but is very slow for files compared to symmetric. And you might recognize the names there like AES maybe, or RSA if you've ever had like a crypto class or a course. Well, let's talk about the growth, we'll call it, the maturity, the expertise being gained on the ransomware side, right? Let's put our hacker hat on for a second. I think it's a hoodie and a Guy Fawkes mask. Very uncomfortable. So first they started with bad encryption. There's something like XOR, which people argue is not even encryption, right? You can break it in like a second, and there was no laughing at hacker there because the hackers weren't getting their ransom because people were going to smart people who do breach recovery and decrypting all the files for them, right? Then they said, you know what, let's use proper encryption, but let's go ahead and write the key to a file on the system. And of course, all of us smart security folks found the key.txt on the folder, on the machine, and they just happily decrypted all the files for you. The hackers realized they had to mature and grow a little bit better. So they would put the key inside the malware, and then, does anyone do any IDA-Pro reverse engineering in here? That they want to admit it? Sweet. So, what you find the key in there, hey, you just saved the world. It's like heroes, save the cheerleaders, save the world. You kind of like, you get the key, you have worldwide success. And a lot of the decryptors are that. What does the hacker do then? He says, oh man, my key's been had, change key, re-release. All the security vendors are still using the old key, but he's happily churning away encrypting files with the new stuff. So he got smarter. He said, let's put the unique key in each malware sample. Now we have a problem with PKI, we'll say. Does anyone familiar with PKI or those projects or have that kind of stuff in their business? It's a little bit of an asset management challenge. We'll put that loosely. So what happens is you got to make sure the right key goes to the right malware to the right person for the right files, right? And that's really hard to do sometimes when you have a whole bunch of stuff going on. So some of the decryptors actually found we're giving valid keys for the wrong person. They couldn't keep their inventory straight in giving the decryptors back down when people paid the ransom. So sometimes the ransoms actually wouldn't even work. The file you got down, even though they kind of did the right thing, except they couldn't keep track of Bill versus Mary. So then they said, let's get smarter on that, and let's go ahead and generate the key on the fly. So a unique key per machine, right? Now things got really intense because now there's no longer one key for the whole world. Now we have one key per machine. And you might break that one key on that one workstation or server. It's not going to work on the next one. That's a challenge. that's where you started seeing different types of encryption come down. By the way, if you can get a couple, remember one thing from each slide, I go a little bit deeper when I see nodding, and then I slow down when I stop seeing nodding. So do what you will with that. So what happens is that we can grab the key as long as they keep the key around. They realize they can protect the key using our good old asymmetric encryption, RSA, and now all of a sudden, I actually had an arrow here that showed the level of stress on the security community and on the board, because you're running out of options to go back and say, hey boss, I got this. It's quickly becoming, I don't have this, I hope we have enough money to cover whatever's coming, right? So when you get down to generating the key on the fly and protecting the key, this is more like the Ryuk world, if you're familiar with ransomware at all, more state-sponsored-ish kind of ransomware. The only way is to get your files back is to pay the ransom, get money to recover and hope for the best, hope your backups are fairly up to date, or wait for law enforcement to seize the server. This is where we are today, moving towards this. The hackers, because of course they really want you to pay the ransom, they started doing was they started advertising that their servers that hold all the keys, if they detect this being tampered with, say like by a plucky law enforcement person coming in to seize the server, they will nuke that server and delete all the keys. That means that even if you wanted to pay the ransom, it didn't matter anymore because all the keys are gone. It's a little bit of a baby in the bathwater, scorched earth exercise, but I guess they don't care at that point. They figured they're not going to get the ransom anyway, so they might as well go ahead and nuke everything, set up a new server in the cloud or whatever, and keep going. So this is where we have maybe some options, and maybe even if you have to wait 6 months for law enforcement to kind of get in there and get everything, this is, yeah, you better pay the ransom. Check your backup policy, check your insurance policy. You can call law enforcement. At that point, you have to make a risk decision. Maybe politely tell them, don't grab that hard drive and run out of the server room because they just might delete your only chance of getting the data back. Any questions? That was like a lot at once, so thanks. Or not, I don't know, I can't tell. So, okay, so forcing payment. And this is another thing where you talk to your business person and they say, oh, just grab the key, it's so easy, right? Well, not quite. Has anyone in here ever seen a ransom note, either through research? Okay, so what it normally says is, okay, great, yeah, I'm sorry, but great, you know. So what it normally says is something like, don't turn the machine off, don't move files around, things like that, right? And I think people sometimes, if they don't get the math behind it, they think the hacker's doing something special. What's really going on is just simple old cryptography, the same kind of stuff that like NIST uses, you know, that recommends using, that you hope that your bank uses, stuff like that. So what happens is this is the old way of doing encryption, even with strong AES, was that you had a key, you went ahead and you encrypted each file, there you go. So you get the key, you're able to decrypt all the files. Awesome. The newer versions of AES, what happens is, if you get nothing else out of this, I'm not asking you all to be like grad students in cryptography, but what I want you to get out of here is that they initialize some variables and do some things, but the encryption is dependent on the order that the files were encrypted in. There is now a link between the files on your machines. So if you move, for instance, this file and decide to try to, you get the key here and you try to use it over here, it's all out of order, doesn't work anymore. Just does not work anymore. And that's why if you have a victim, like say, hopefully not your company, but maybe someone else's doesn't do the right things, right? What will happen is that if they try to change around files, or God forbid, delete a file in the middle, then you just have to give really bad news to them, because there is no way you can ever get that back now without a whole bunch of work. Like call the government and maybe donate to Google's new quantum computer. That would be helpful. So did that make sense through all my ranting and rambling about math? Cool, awesome, guys, let's keep going. Okay, so invest in ransomware, profits are up in ransomware. So what we have here is that we have the maximizing customer payment. What I mean by that is that what's happening is that the tradecraft and level of effort behind the encryption activity drives a lot of what's going on in terms of the level of pain for the customer, right? And also the level of payout for the hacker. So go to local workstation, you got that, maybe a couple $1,000s, right? It's annoying, you know. But for a business, we're trying to get the database going, right? We want to keep our point of sale terminals going. We don't need to worry about Doris and accounting or Mike and sales as much, even though they kind of are mad at us now. But you keep going down the list. We have spreading here is automated for the most part. We have network file shares. That's a lot of that automated now, where they'll actually go and encrypt the network file shares. Maneuver to production servers, sometimes automated, but a lot of times it's manual. So doing things like protecting access to just move around your network, willy-nilly, that's good because that protects your stuff. It also means that they're going to try harder, which means they're going to ask more money. So there's always a catch-22 here. Overcoming obstacles. I love the idea of like having segmented resources. Like they call it micro-segmentation. It's kind of like a vendor word. It means it'll slow them down. It makes them want to try all that harder, right? It's like, you're teaching your kid how to ride a bicycle, and you put them on real speed bumps. You got to really want it now. You're not going to fall over. So that's kind of what happens here with overcoming obstacles. You're going to make it harder for them. Are there any CISPers in the room? A few, great. So there's like 3 security people in the room. I'm just kidding. So so what that means is that there's things that delay or slow down an attack, right? And there's things that will remove it altogether. Well, this is a risk mitigation technique where what you can do is you can put these things in place, and that way, instead of getting hit by the 12-year-olds with like 3-year-old ransomware that they just repacked, now you're getting people that really want it, that you're probably not going to keep out anyway. So it's always better to make it harder for them. I think I have a... Oh, yeah, okay. So we're going to vendor stuff. So I'm a vendor, by the way, right? I was doing services and security stuff for companies. Realized that my only way to have better impact was to automate ruthlessly. So now I'm a vendor. So let's talk. Okay, so dwell time. The strategy some people have is they'll proactively kill programs. That's a really easy way to have your security budget reduced, because you're going to make a lot of people angry if you start killing things that are critical to the business. Honestly. So I don't recommend doing that. Instead, I like seeing a proper risk management strategy. But moving on. So the malware containment, we have 400 hours a week spent on erroneous alerts. I don't know, dwell time of 200 days. What that means is that when they get in, they have minimum 200 days to figure out where they want to detonate their ransomware, how they want to do it. Some people are naive and they don't care, or it's a drive-by, and they'll just go ahead and knock out workstations, right? We saw some of the cities, right, where the cities are all like, yeah, we're really good. And I'm like, no, you're really lucky because the ransomware people didn't care enough or weren't skilled enough to go after the good stuff that made you cry. So what we see here, though, is that with dwell time, we make a breach detection product, and we would watch the bad guys get in sometimes, and they detonate, and oh well. We were still on the phone with the CISO whenever things were going down, right? So with ransomware, all that dwell time to try to catch up to the hacker, which we're always catching up, don't let any vendor fool you, it works against us. Because at this point, the ransomware hacker is in charge, right? Because he's in there. It's like having a saboteur in your military base, and he can do whatever he wants, and you're just hoping you can catch him first before he decides to blow up something.
So wait, excuse me. Where do these numbers come from? Are these are averages for? Are these averages?
Yeah, a lot of it came from Ponemon, and it's regurgitated across the industry.
Okay.
There's surveys. These are if you Google dwell time, you'll get these numbers, or another chart that has the exact same numbers, because we're all going back to the same kind of security surveys.
Is it so? Dwell time is increasing as time goes by.
Yes, it's a very variable kind of scenario where, because it really depends on what they have in place and how good the hacker is, how much they care, even if they are good. But generally, since it only takes a couple minutes to detonate a program, right, at most, and a lot of it's automated, anything above 5 minutes is probably too long, and we're looking at 200 days. Does that help? Mm-hmm. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's talk about backups. And we've heard this before, right, where they say, oh, if only I had backups, the world would be a great place. I actually work for a backup vendor. I will not name them, but over in Silicon Valley, and we're doing training, and the dirty little secret, which I think is the next slide. No, it's not. Okay, is that backups are hard. It's hard to keep them up to date, to maintain all the storage, and then when something goes down, you need the backups. It's not this simple 5-minute process, right? So we actually had a sysadmin in my training. I was going to go out there as like a factory rep to answer questions for vendors, and there was a guy in the room who was a sysadmin who obviously had a very negative experience, and he kept bringing up saying, "What are you guys doing to fix this problem?" And the number one rule in vendors for backup solutions is don't talk about how hard it is to get that person's business back up and running. You just don't do it. You talk about how great it is, you get the backup there for it's all good. Well, unfortunately, it's not always that good, especially with ransomware. So let's go. Okay, first of all, I'd like to mention this real quick. This just happened. Johnsonville City, they got hit with ransomware. It looks like they have upgraded to a different storage solution in the cloud, but different storage solution for their backups. So they were able to kind of evade some of the problems that they could have had otherwise. What happened was that, and this is an example of where the tradecraft of the hacker determines the pain, not necessarily how good we are, right? Better lucky than good sometimes. The ransomware people didn't bother checking their cloud database of backups to kind of nuke that or encrypt that. So they kind of dodged the bullet there. It wasn't because they had a different backup. It's not like you change from vendor A to B and suddenly the world's a better place, right? It's all just computers. It's just the hacker knew to check for vendor A, didn't know to check for vendor B, and they kind of got lucky. Sometimes that's all you need, right, to get a raise. So that's kind of how that happened. So either way, it still happened. They still have a few days of downtime. So even on this great story, they still went down. They still have people who can't do their job, but at least not like Baltimore, where people couldn't even pay the bills, right? It could always be worse. Any questions? Sweet. Okay, so I have a little more gray hair than some people in the room, but like these used to be awesome. So, okay, so the Johnson City example we went through. So with backups, are there any old are there any sysadmins in here or ex-recovering? Okay, as soon as like the secretary came to you and said that their hard drive failed and they can't find their file now, what's the one thing you always say?
You saved to server?
Yeah, like where's your backup? Did you use the file server? You always like blame them. That's like sysadmin 101. Blame them and then try to fix it. So with this, backups are great. They're not going to always be up to date, and even if they are, there's not unlimited storage for companies. So we've actually seen where companies will have like their backup going all the time, and then they're backing up encrypted files for a while back, and then they're like, hey, geeky cyber guy, go ahead and decrypt my stuff for me because my backups are screwed up too. Sorry, I can't help you. But the best news is that the more you do, just like with Johnson City, the more you do, the better chance you have of being better than the attention the hacker paid. If that made sense, right? So as long as you do something, okay, great. You do more, you're even better off. I really like this idea of offline backups, and I'm going to get back to that in a second. Actually, let's do it now. Yeah, so what happens is that internally in our company, we're testing a lot of ransomware right now because we developed a product on ransomware, right? And what I didn't want to have happen was that, with one of my engineers, that they ran ransomware, and next thing I know, I'm down because I just encrypted my whole company by accident, right? Or one of my interns did, or something like that. So we implemented an offline solution. There's different vendors to do it. We use AWS Glacier, vendor agnostic. The whole point is that I have a whole bunch of guys who are really and girls who are women, I guess, who are really into pen testing and cyber operations, right? So what I said was, hey guys, go ahead and pen test my stuff, right? Let's see if you can get rid of my backups. They did. They simply, got my machine, elevated credentials. They found the right user with the right credentials for access. They disabled the read-only on the offline piece, got into the admin panel, and showed me that I could, lose everything anyway. After, and they made me buy them beer. So I guess the point is here that you want to make it as hard as possible for the ransomware people to do the most damage, right? You want to get out of having to pay that ransom. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is every time there's a news article where this hacker doesn't do their job right, and kind of gets away with not getting their ransom paid, they learn and they're coming back and not repeating the same mistake twice. So what I'm seeing is not only are the costs of the ransoms going up as they get more savvy on the business side, but I'm watching where the mistakes of yesterday are not the mistakes of today. Even with that old slide back here, Come on, keep up with me. Keep up with me. Come on, you can do it. There you go. The maturity that we're seeing, the growth we're seeing, is almost like a military-grade exercise, and watching them go from very little to no good security, all the way to, honestly, at this level, the quality of the software I'm seeing is as good or better than a lot of the nation-state stuff out there. These guys are serious, they're smart, they're entrepreneurial, and they're not going away because it's making them a ton of money. Now, okay, so offline backups. Any questions on offline backups? It's kind of like a new concept. Okay? Either I'm doing really badly or I'm doing really well, one or the other, but either way, let's go. Okay, yeah, so we kind of went through where they're going to get in, the dwell time is higher than their explosion time, right? And I realized that all the advice being given out by places like CERT or other places that are very well-meaning and very knowledgeable, I realized I could line up every one of their quotes or suggestions to an old World War I influenza hygiene kind of public service announcement, where you could say, don't take person's breath. This didn't scale well. They didn't do digital back then, right? So it says, don't. Basically, it's like don't go to places with crowds, things like that. Which you can line that up pretty much to all the cyber kind of hygiene stuff nowadays. Like don't plug your computer into places you don't know, all kind of stuff. So I realized that we're really at a point where all we can do is give advice because there wasn't. There's not inoculation, there's not antibiotics, right? Once you're encrypted now with the newer stuff, you're done, right? So what I see instead is that the cyber hygiene is just like the flu prevention stuff that your kids might have in school or at college or whatever. So cyber hygiene, if you haven't seen this already, go just Google cyber hygiene. Essentially it's saying things like use two-factor authentication, patch your systems. It's all like back to the basics that we still can't seem to get our hands on, right? So, but use good passwords, use antivirus, all the good things. This is where we are now, and this is why I think we're in such bad straits, such dire straits, quite honestly, because the hackers are, what they're doing is they're maturing very quickly. I'm very impressed. If we find out that they work for famous people one day as the developers, I'd be like, oh, that's why you were so good. That's kind of where we're at right now. What we did at Cyber Crucible was we actually took a stance and said, they're going to get through, build some kind of antibiotics or a vaccine program to say, hey, let's go ahead and decrypt everything and do it on the fly with some very advanced techniques. That's kind of where we're at. We're automating only because what we're seeing is that, and this is actually a good thing, is that as the ransomware industry is maturing, we're seeing where people are guaranteed to get the right key and a program that will decrypt for them if they pay the ransom. Because if you think about it, they're infecting larger and larger numbers of people, and they can't have manual kind of bespoke processes there. They have to automate it, just like we're all automating in our workplace, right? So instead what they have is you're almost guaranteed to get a good decryptor coming up if you pay the ransom. But otherwise, their tradecraft has improved well enough that, yeah, you're kind of limited on options. Sorry, just, calling up your buddy and giving him a bag of Cheetos, right, that old game, to do stuff isn't really going to work anymore, unfortunately. So that's where we're at, and I went really fast. I'm on a roll, lots of coffee. So, do y'all have any questions at all? Yes?
When the encryption goes off or explodes, we go to backup or whatever. I mean, is it, what indication is there that you would have that the backups are also infected? I mean, do you know right away that it's encrypted? Can you just go back to the last backup, or?
That's a great question. So the normally what happens, there's a bunch of things in that one question, right?
Yeah.
So the first is that there are services out there that look for bad extensions on files. And then the hackers realized that, and they said, oh, we just won't change the extension anymore at all. Then that kind of messed up a lot of people, right? So instead what you see is that you can look for these crazy, weird, random extensions on the ransomware files, on the encrypted files in the cloud. That's something someone does. Someone else will do some checks to see if that PDF is really a PDF or if it's a random text. They'll do that as well. That works on certain file types, not on other types necessarily. that's some of the checks you can do in the cloud. Now, I'm sorry, in the backup, what we are seeing is where people are saying, hey, I need that file, and then you look and it's encrypted, right? And then you say, oh, well, let's go ahead and roll it back another week. And they see it's encrypted. And they'll roll back until they find the unencrypted one. And you better hope that the version you wanted is before that, or that you have a 30-day aging off policy, which is actually really good for backups, right? If you're doing constant backups. And they'll come back and they'll say, it aged off. Like the unencrypted one aged off. They've been feeding for a while. That is more of the high-quality ransomware actor, where they're actually taking their time sometimes, and they're not nuking your system. They're just encrypting things on file share slowly, and they'll say corrupting your backup, in a way that you can't get access to it. Again, it's all about the money, right? The Benjamins.
Well, I think especially a
I'll
lot
stop
of
one person
business
last, so I guess that's
data,
good.
a lot of business data, accounting and things. I mean, you really need yesterday's, last
You do.
month's accounting data.
You do.
Isn't going to help me either.
Yes,
So,
and I get paid to get yelled at when that happens. Like, I'm like, sorry, I can't help you. So in that case, you're absolutely right, which is why we went the decryptor route and not the let's figure out a way to have infinite storage and a backup route, right? Or infinite backups. That's kind of how we did that, and why we made the decision.
How do they present the files to you, though, while they're doing the encryption? Is there something that's decrypting the information while you're, before they send you the note?
They can. So sometimes they'll actually send you a key that will work on like 3 files, or they'll send you your files back or something like that, so you can watch it work. Almost like a pilot program.
I mean, during the attack, are they encrypting everything all at once, or is this a gradual process?
That's a great question. So it's actually the quality of the ransomware that determines that. We have on our website, we actually have GitHub project source code for a Python program that does exactly what the ransomware does, just without spreading, because that's just a lawsuit, right? But like, so just to watch people happen, right? Some of the ransomware out there will do like multi-threaded, multi-process kind of stuff to execute on a whole bunch of folders at once. Others will do it one file at a time, right? And you'll actually watch, if you let it run, where Windows will happily recognize the file, and then after a while, you're like, the icon for the file goes away because Windows is like, I don't want that anymore, and then you'll watch, it'll kind of like go through. On YouTube, we have a demo video to show people. We use it as a training aid a lot of times. You can watch, it's a demo for our product, but we end up chopping into pieces to show people what ransomware actually looks like, when it's happening.
I mean, how does somebody go, we have 5-week backups. I mean, say it's a file that somebody wanted, how does it go 5 weeks before somebody realizes something's encrypted?
I can't answer that. I'm not allowed to insult customers whenever they have that issue, right? So what happens is I think it's very similar to any kind of disaster recovery situation, right? Where you have some processes that are running in production mode, and there's just not time to back up every second of every day, right? So if the hard drives would go down, or a flood, or a fire, or anything like that, it's a very similar situation, right? Where you have your backups, so your business still exists. It's not like you're closing up shop and running away before you get fired, right? So your business still exists, your files are still there. There's not necessarily the most recent files. There's always a loss. And then there's things you can do. That's normal DR kind of stuff, right? Now you're chasing out customers to ask them for the invoice back and stuff like that, right? Which is painful, but doable. Yeah?
How are people asking for payment? Is it PayPal or wire transfer? And is there any success in tracing the money?
That's a great question. So a lot of them are using Bitcoin or some other kind of cryptocurrency. The good news is that despite what you see or read about, cryptocurrency is 100% trackable. You can actually track where it's going in the world. The bad news is that you can't really tell who's behind the scenes until you get to a point where they're transferring it over to cash, over to a checking account, and only if you have a relationship with that bank, that you can actually see how it's going. There's tumblers out there that make it much harder, where they'll actually, anyone here know what tumblers are? Okay, cool. So what happens is that, like, let's say like all of us in the front row are really entrepreneurial cyber criminals, right, or something else, right? And we all have Bitcoin, and we all like, I don't want Tim. I don't want like my nefarious activities to be tracked back to me. So I'm going to put my stuff into a jar. All my Bitcoin into a jar. And unfortunately, you're in the same boat, right? You don't want to launder money, busy man. And so you're going to put your stuff in the jar, right? And then we're going to shake it all up, and we're going to pass out the chips at random to everybody in the row, right? Now, as long as enough people do that, then statistically, you have a chance of making the Department of Justice or whomever's chasing you kind of go to the wrong person, right? Kind of screws things up a little bit. That's what tumblers do. Now, if I have 10 million and you have like 100, because you're not as good as I am at stealing people's money, then what'll happen is I get all my stuff back pretty much, right? So that's kind of how it works. So tumblers work to a degree to make things harder, but there's still plenty of evidence of where a good detective will still sit there and go through all the leads and chase all the phone numbers and go through to find out pretty much where things sit in terms of where the money's going. That's how they have captured some people. Yeah.
So, usually when there's a ransom, there's a time frame associated with it, right? With the
Yes.
X amount
Because
of
sometimes it
time.
escalates as well. Yes.
Yes, and so, it's not easy to get X amount of Bitcoin, within that time frame. Are you finding that companies are getting Bitcoin in advance and having that preparation done just in case?
So I went the tech route in terms of I'm going to prevent them from having to pay ransom at all, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
my focus, but there are people. There's a company called Coveware that we speak to, and actually they're in the business of preparing to pay the hacker or negotiate with the hacker. It reminds me of like those people that were the Somali pirates, right? They were like people that were actually negotiating with the terrorists over there, It reminds me of that kind of like seedy world where they actually are in talks with those folks. So Coveware is the company that we speak to. They might have a program where they're pre-purchasing Bitcoin. It doesn't take long to purchase Bitcoin. It takes longer to go through have your accounting person do it and convince your CEO that you're not really doing something bad. All that process.
Right.
That's what we've seen where they just can't get it together in time because it's such a new and strange thing. It reminds me of like trying to go to like your boss and being like, yeah, I want money in case like one of us gets kidnapped. They'd be like, can you please leave my office now? I'm calling security. So that's kind of where it's at. But there are companies that specialize in negotiating, and they kind of took that route of, hey, we want to help people pay ransoms, which there's a place for that, right? So, any other questions? You again.
Yes. Me.
All right.
Is there anything you can do low cost or free as far as what things would you do to the computers to prevent ransomware from occurring or spreading? I know there used to be a company, I think it was called Foolish IT, had a program called Crypto Prevent when one of the crypto locker first came out, and it essentially made group policies for a standalone Windows machine.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think at a time you could see what the group policies were and replicate that on the network. Is there anything you recommend now as far as group policies or settings that would slow down or stop crypto ransomware?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of prevention, so I think having a very mature risk management policy first is important in that we're not going to be foolproof, right? We already aren't. Only now it's much worse, right? Because it's no longer a breach situation. Now it's a, hey, they're going to lock up my machine situation and possibly put me out of business, right? So instead, yeah, good antivirus is great. Keeping your signatures up to date because there's always old stuff running around. It's like, I want the maximum return on investment. So you may be awesome at security, and I know that my stuff's getting caught, but it's Tim again. Tim, unfortunately, is not running good antivirus. And so I know I can use that same ransomware and throw it at his computer, and it will work because his antivirus is up to date. There's also, yes, privilege escalation issues where don't run as admin. I think this is all like back to the basics kind of stuff, right? Which we have a hard time as a community. We're a cost center a lot of times, we're not in the operation of the business, but doing all the right things in terms of like, risk, de-risking in terms of using users instead of admin users, it'd be good. Locking down sharing and things like that, patching your system. What that does is that makes it harder for them to throw down an exploit, to elevate to admin, which you already turned off, right? But elevate to admin so that then they can turn off all your security controls and do whatever they want, right? So patching your system kind of takes care of some of that, their access. We still see where they will happily figure out, either encrypt all your stuff in your home directory, right, on your desktop, whatever. That's normally painful enough. or they will go ahead and just kind of hang out and use normal malware to do breach activities and laterally move through your network. At that point, it gets very expensive, right, to kind of keep them away from having that level of maturity. The good news is that a good hacker, as far as I'm concerned, a good hacker will not waste their time and best tools on grandma, right? They're not going to like spend 6 months infiltrating grandma's recipe database, although they might, but instead, what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and save that kind of tradecraft and their best tools for the people that have the most money. That's Dennis talking. I have no proof of that, but that just seems like that's what I would do. Tim, is that what you do? Okay, awesome. Good, Tim. Any other questions? Wow, we're back to the awkward silence. Okay, cool. Then I guess we're good. I don't even know what time it is.
1:38.
Wow, we're really early. Okay.
You might want to speak to some points about the risk insurance side of things, and let's say you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Let's say you do get hit. The steps folks can take, not just on the technology side, but business and process, and risk insurance, and how you're looking at the problem might be something you could speak to.
Yeah. Are there any insurance people in here, or people that are involved in cyber insurance? Okay, well, so what's happening is that we're getting approached by companies and people that technology is great, but then the MBAers of the world, do we have any MBAers in here? I can make fun of them then. Oh, never mind, okay. MBAers are awesome, I'm sorry, sir. So what happens is they say, okay, that's great, you have a point solution, a technology for ransomware, right? And then they say, well, on my balance sheet for my business, I need to take care of this risk in a more holistic way. Right? Because I read my CSV book and I know that I need to take care of things broadly, not just with a point solution. So what we're seeing is that our product is a way that they can actually reduce the payout or remove the need to pay out, which for them is a good thing because cyber insurance right now is paying a lot of money and they're seeing the fines go up in the millions now in terms of what the hackers are charging. So we're seeing where they're actually tying, has anyone ever done a cyber evaluation or risk evaluation for an insurance plan for your company? Been involved in that? You have, okay, great. So, they go through the paces and they make sure you're patching and things like that, and they determine your risk or your exposure to their insurance plan based on that. What we're seeing is they're saying ransomware is the big ticket item right now, right? That they can't manage the risk appropriately. So they're coming to us as one of the measures to say, can you help us measure that risk and then also mitigate that risk so that we can afford to be more aggressive, give their customers better outcomes, but also they're insurance companies, right? They don't want to pay out either. If there's a way they can use technology and not pay out, they will. It's very smart for them. So we are seeing where they're starting to put riders into cyber insurance policies saying, if you get hit with ransomware, we're not going to pay that. Or we're not going to pay that unless, to your point, X, Y, and Z have already happened. And because we're being approached, I'm assuming that I am one of those three, right? In terms of the policies, they are getting a lot more expensive now. So it's the $900K is the premium being charged Baltimore right now on their cyber insurance. And I think that's the start. They're starting to realize they have to recoup their losses as these costs are exponential. Again, profits are up, right, in ransomware. I think it's 500% right now is the number. It's going to go from there. What's going to happen is that cyber insurance is going to either exclude ransomware from your business's insurance portfolio without something else in place, or what's going to happen is your premiums are going to be through the roof. It reminds me of where they started doing with the state-sponsored malware is now a nation-state attack, terrorism or whatever kind of stuff, where they weren't paying people if they got hacked with certain tools. Attribution is don't get me started on that, but but they were starting to find ways to not pay out. And ransomware seems to be the next target for that. So companies that were covered aren't necessarily going to be covered much more, or that's going to change for their insurance companies to protect their liability. I saw nodding, it was really cool because normally insurance is like, yeah, they're going to be empty. So I hope that helps. Oh, that was you. That's Aaron, never mind. Aaron's my marketing guy.
It's still new though, because we have cyber insurance and I fill out the application every year, and the application has absolutely no bearing on what we do.
That's correct.
It basically looks like we're a vendor online and have a large, payment processing. We're a healthcare company.
right?
So I mean, I'm mostly interested in, database breaches and having to report HIPAA violations.
Right. By the way, your insurer is in the back of the room. Let's talk to you now. So what's happening is that it is new and it is essentially unmanaged risk. And we look at all those case studies like Johnson City, right, or Texas, where the risk wasn't well managed and they maybe didn't have the right tools to manage it completely, but also the risk was up to the attacker. It depended on how much the attacker wanted to do bad things and how good they were. They're all still learning. It's funny because like in cyber insurance, they're still learning how to do that. And on the ransomware, they're still learning how to exact maximum payment as well. So we're seeing both industries mature at the same time. Unfortunately, in this case, normally attackers win, right, while the insurance company tries to catch up and monetize that, assess that risk. Yeah, I think we're in for some rocky rides ahead of us, unfortunately. Any other questions? Yeah.
Have you ever seen cases where a ransom is paid, but a decryption key is not provided?
Yes. I did have someone where actually we spent 6 months decrypting without the key even, and it turns out that they had nuked the data before encrypting it. So I have a word. It's a certain kind of move when you do that, But like, but what happened was that like we decrypted it. I spent 6 months of untold computing hours, and they had zeroed out all the data. I think as the automation comes to play and the maturity increases, that kind of nonsense is going to go away because you can't infect 100,000 businesses, retail establishments, and process payments and have all the decryption and do things like that because people, it's a big enough population now, they won't pay anymore, so you're out of business. Or you want to choose like who you're going to mess with. That's not automation. That's manual, right? So instead, I think what we're going to see is a guarantee to get the right key and a guarantee that's going to work, and then a nice, easy transactional kind of arrangement. But I think the days where, either they give you a bad key, no key, because they're jerks, or they mess up the decryption somehow. I think that time is going away. Now, we saw that slide on how file A is tied to file B is tied to file C. That's not going away, sorry. So I think we're still going to have a whole bunch of people that actually are going to move things around, not because they're security, like we're not going to do that, but like Doris in accounting or Mike in sales will do that, right? I think that's still going to happen. I'm having to divert some resources to analytics that will kind of like fill in that file B after it's been decrypted or deleted or moved around. They reorder. We can already reorder things for them and recover, but now it's like, okay, well the person deleted the file because they couldn't open it. And now I'm like, well, man, that's hard, So we're actually having to move people to that. So now it's like the attacker did all the right things, right? He acted honorably as pirates do, right? But like the victim didn't do the right thing in that part, right? They kind of sunk the ship before he could go take everything,